It began as just another day in the courtroom, the kind of day where tensions ran high, but routine seemed to dictate the flow. Lawyers shuffled papers, the judge adjusted his glasses, and the jurors sat quietly, waiting to hear the next round of arguments. But no one in that room, absolutely no one, was prepared for what was about to unfold. This was the day when evidence would no longer just be words on paper or testimonies from witnesses. This was the day when the truth would play out before their very eyes, in the form of a video that would shake the very foundation of the trial. Now, before I take you into that moment of revelation, I want to remind you, if you enjoy these real-life stories, filled with twists, suspense, and lessons that stay with you long after the video ends, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We bring you gripping cases and powerful stories every day, stories that will not only keep you on the edge of your seat, but also make you think about the deeper truths of life. Hit that subscribe button and stay connected. You don't want to miss what's coming next. The case had already been dragging on for weeks. Witness after witness took the stand, each one painting a picture that was either too polished to be believable or so broken it left more questions than answers. The defense insisted their client was innocent, a victim of lies and manipulation. The prosecution pushed back, claiming the evidence was clear, though much of it was circumstantial. And then, almost like an afterthought, came the mention of the video. At first, it seemed like just another piece of evidence. But as whispers spread through the courtroom, even the most seasoned lawyers leaned forward in anticipation. The bailiff wheeled in a small screen, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Some of the jurors straightened in their chairs, their expressions betraying a mix of curiosity and dread. Others clasped their hands tightly in their laps, as though bracing themselves for impact. The judge called for order, his voice stern, but even he couldn't disguise the flicker of interest in his eyes. Everyone knew this wasn't going to be just another exhibit. This was different. As the lights dimmed slightly and the video began to play, the silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the faint hum of the machine. The screen lit up, and there it was, the footage that could unravel weeks of testimony, contradict carefully rehearsed stories, and expose what really happened. It was raw, it was real, and it was undeniable. In that moment, the courtroom no longer felt like a room for arguments and theories. It became a theater where truth played itself out unfiltered. People held their breath, jaws dropped, and the jury leaned forward as if being pulled by an invisible force. Every second of the footage carried weight, every frame a revelation. And with each passing moment, it became clearer. This video wasn't just another piece of evidence, it was the evidence, the kind of proof that changes everything. But what exactly did the video show? And how did it shift the balance of the trial so dramatically? As the last frames flickered across the screen, one thing was certain. No one in that courtroom would walk away unchanged. The video ended, but the silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. Jurors sat frozen in their seats, eyes still glued to the screen, even though it had already gone black. The prosecution, who had been confident but careful, now wore expressions of triumph. Their case suddenly strengthened beyond measure. On the other side, the defense attorney's face drained of color. He shuffled his papers nervously, as though hoping to find an argument hiding somewhere between the lines. But deep down, he knew. The game had changed. The footage was clear, undeniable. It showed the defendant in a way no testimony could twist, no words could soften. Actions speak louder than words, and in this case, they screamed louder than anything said in the courtroom so far. There were no camera tricks, no clever editing, just reality, captured for all to see. And that reality spoke volumes. Jurors exchanged glances, some with widened eyes, others shaking their heads slowly in disbelief. One woman on the jury leaned back in her chair, covering her mouth as if to stop herself from gasping again. Another juror scribbled something furiously on his notepad, though his hand shook with each stroke. The power of seeing truth laid bare before them was overwhelming. The judge finally broke the silence, his gavel echoing against the wooden bench. "Order in the court," he commanded, but even he couldn't disguise the weight in his voice. It was rare, even for someone who had presided over countless cases, to see evidence with such impact. This wasn't the kind of proof that left room for interpretation. It was a hammer striking down on the very heart of the defense's argument. The defense attorney rose slowly, his voice faltering, as he tried to downplay what had just been shown. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "what you've just seen may look convincing, but remember, context is everything." He reached for explanations, searching desperately for a way to soften the blow. But the jurors weren't buying it. They had just witnessed something that didn't need context. The truth was plain, staring them in the face. And yet beneath the surface of that courtroom drama, something even deeper was taking shape. For the families involved, this wasn't just about winning or losing a case. It was about trust, betrayal, and the consequences of choices. That video had exposed more than an action. It had exposed character. And when character is revealed, the ripple effects stretch far beyond the walls of a courthouse. In that moment, you could almost feel the shift in the air. The balance of the trial tipped like scales, finally finding their weight. The prosecution now held the upper hand, and the defense, once defiant, looked cornered. But even with the video, the trial wasn't over. There were still questions to be asked, explanations to be given, and arguments to be made. The video may have changed everything, but the battle was far from finished. As the day continued and the court prepared for cross-examinations, one thought lingered in everyone's mind. The following morning, the courtroom was packed tighter than ever. News of the video had spread overnight, rippling through the city like wildfire. Reporters lined the steps outside the courthouse, their cameras flashing as they shouted questions, desperate for a soundbite. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next, how the defense would respond, and whether the jury had already silently delivered its verdict in their hearts. The defense attorney walked in with a stiff posture, trying to mask the exhaustion that weighed on his shoulders. He had spent the entire night reviewing the footage, pausing, rewinding, analyzing every second, searching for a loophole. But there was none. No glitch, no technical flaw, nothing to challenge its authenticity. The only path left was strategy, an attempt to shift the jury's perspective, to plant seeds of doubt where certainty had begun to grow. When court resumed, he stood up and approached the jury box. His voice was calm, but carried a tension that betrayed his nerves. "What you saw yesterday," he said, "was powerful. I don't deny that. But I ask you, what don't you see? What's happening before and after those moments? A video can capture truth, yes, but it can also capture a fragment of a much bigger story. You cannot convict someone based on fragments." The jurors listened, but their expressions were guarded. The defense's words struggled against the raw memory of what they had seen. Still, in the courtroom, procedure mattered. Every argument had to be heard, every perspective considered. The defense leaned into that fact, hoping to carve out enough doubt to sway at least one or two jurors. But then the prosecution rose. With steady confidence, they reminded the jury that truth doesn't need embellishment. "Fragments don't lie," the prosecutor said, locking eyes with the jurors. "The video you saw shows choice, and choice defines responsibility. What you witnessed was not an accident, not a misunderstanding. It was intent, and intent cannot be excused by context." The words hit hard, resonating like a final chord in a symphony. The defense shifted uncomfortably, while the jury's faces hardened with conviction. Still, some looked conflicted. Even undeniable proof can spark questions, because justice isn't only about evidence, it's about conscience. As the trial pressed forward, witnesses were called. Some trembled under oath, trying to align their testimonies with the weight of the video. Others grew defiant, their words clashing with what had already been revealed. The contradictions only deepened the divide, making the jury's task both clearer and heavier. Outside the courtroom, families wept, friendships fractured, loyalties were tested. A single video had become more than evidence. It had become a mirror reflecting the truth about people's lives. And when truth is exposed in such a raw, undeniable way, it changes not only verdicts, but relationships, reputations, and futures. The final day of the trial arrived, and the tension was so thick you could almost hear the silence pressing down on the courtroom. The jury filed in, faces pale with the weight of their duty. For days, they had replayed that video in their minds, each frame etched into memory, each second asking for judgment. The defense had done everything possible, questioned motives, pointed at context, tried to cast shadows over the light of truth. But shadows cannot erase what the eyes have seen. And when the judge asked the foreperson to rise and deliver the verdict, the world seemed to hold its breath. "Guilty." The word rang out like a hammer striking iron. Some gasped, some wept, others simply closed their eyes in relief. Years of denial and uncertainty ended in a single moment. Justice, though delayed, had found its voice. But what lingered was not only the verdict, it was the lesson. That video had not just changed the trial, it had changed lives. It showed that truth, no matter how long it hides, has a way of surfacing. And when it does, it demands to be acknowledged. It demands courage, even when the cost is high. The convicted sat in silence, a face drained of defiance. For the first time since the trial began, there were no more words, no more arguments, only acceptance of what had been undeniable all along. Outside, cameras flashed as reporters rushed to capture reactions. Families hugged tightly, some in joy, others in heartbreak. The city buzzed with the story. But for those inside the courtroom, it wasn't just news. It was a reminder of how fragile justice can feel and how powerful it becomes when the truth finally takes the stand. As the judge gave closing remarks, he looked at the jury and thanked them for their service, reminding them that justice isn't easy, but it is necessary. The jurors nodded, knowing they had witnessed something that would remain with them forever. And so the case ended, not with celebration, but with reflection. Reflection on the weight of truth, the danger of lies, and the way one piece of evidence can reshape everything we believe. Friends, as you watch this story unfold, maybe you felt the same weight. The reminder that truth matters, even when it hurts, and that one moment of honesty can change everything. If you found meaning in this story, make sure you subscribe to our channel for daily videos like this. We bring you real stories, powerful messages, and lessons that leave you thinking long after the video ends. And remember this, Truth may take time, but it never stays buried forever.